Coaching executives. You probably think I might have a boss who needs a bit of, let's say, coaching. The question, of course, is how do I find the right coach? Who is the right coach? How to do coaching? How to do executive coaching? And we have someone here with quite an impressive CV who got into coaching. Hello and welcome, Ash Seddeek.
Thank you so much for having me, Niels.
Thank you very much for taking the time and we get straight into the interview. I mean, you come from, I think you went from Deloitte to Cisco, so really huge brands. And then you get into this incredibly competitive and also non-regulated market of coaching, where basically anyone can claim, I'm a coach and here I am. How did you get into executive coaching? What was your reason to go that way?
That's a great question. So I was going to become an applied linguist coming out of Egypt, and essentially really end up teaching English to Egyptians or Arabs in the Middle East. But
Mm-hmm.
I ended up coming to the US on a Fulbright scholarship to become a linguist and
Nice
hopefully maybe
one.
become a university professor. But I actually found out that even in the US, similar to Egypt, people don't get paid as much teaching.
That is correct. That is
You
correct,
know,
yes.
so I ended up working in the corporate environment, and then got into training and development because it was very close to the teaching world, and that's really where I found out eventually at Cisco that communication is at the heart of everything that happens. And then when I left Cisco back in 2015, I started, one client at a time getting into coaching. Went and got certification with the Marshall Goldsmith organization, which is very stakeholder-centered coaching approach. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really how I got started. A lot of the business I got initially was from a lot of people that I've worked with before. They knew that I had some interest in communications, and the work that I did at Cisco working on the largest sales kickoff that happens annually, I ended up essentially interacting with the CEO of the company, the top 20 executives in the company. And of course, when you look at how they speak on the stage, you actually see a variety of levels of skill. And I
Yeah.
kept wondering, how can I level set that skill across the speakers? Succeeded with some of them, but definitely could see that many of them needed a lot of coaching in order for them to be able to come to the stage and act as the best among them. And that was really the genesis of how I got into coaching.
Mhm. Excellent. So when you now say there's a wide range of skill set around there, and many people, of course, might think I need coaching somehow, but I think also many people are sitting there and think, I do not want to become one of the victims of these motivational, inspirational people who simply sell online classes, take the money, and then just say, that was it. Thank you very much. Next. So how do I actually find the right coach when someone is now sitting here listening to this and saying, I think I need coaching, but the sheer amount of coaches out there make me so insecure, pretty much nothing else than a choice overload bias, where people say, if I have too much choice, I probably don't choose any one of them.
I think that's it's a fair comment, and I do encourage people to ask the coach for some client testimonials. Like in my line of work, as I mentioned, we use this approach called stakeholder-centered coaching,
Hmm.
which means I would go into the organization and I will speak with people who work with Niels, maybe five of them, and I will basically ask each one of them, how would you like Niels to communicate with you? So I gather input. One of the people I speak with is Niels' manager and sometimes the HR business partner, because if I'm coaching a VP at Uber, I am talking with the circle of key people in their circle. And
Yeah.
of course, within the engagement, we need to do midpoint touch points with these leaders, and then eventually at the very end to make sure that, as you're saying, a successful outcome happens. There's something that we can verify. So, for example, if somebody says, Ash, come and coach me, a lot of the time I go into these meetings with executives and my lips are tied. I don't say a word. I don't know what's going on. Can you help me unlock this? So we then work on that particular aspect. And then, of course, you'd hope that within 6 months of that engagement, that person goes into executive meetings. They come into the meeting with one or two questions that they can ask organically and be very genuinely interested in the discussion, and that now they feel that they can actually speak up and speak their mind, and feel that they have that confidence within those meetings. So I think that would be a very visible, and I think sometimes the challenge is if you don't have a very visible metric that you're looking for, something that you want to achieve, then to your point, it's very wishy-washy and we don't really know what we're trying to make an impact on.
Mm, absolutely. However, when you now coach executives, let's face it, usually they have quite a career track record. They probably are quite strongly opinionated, and they probably say, Ash, look, I still got here. I am a VP at a large, probably unicorn status startup or even a corporation. So I think I did reasonably well here. How do you want to change these people's minds? Because they are not known to be easily influenced.
Very good point. And what I actually see happen a lot of the time, it's interesting how at the very end of the day, it's a very small world in the sense that let's say if Neil's boss says, well, Neil needs to improve in a certain area, no matter how successful Neil's is, Niels then takes that input and says, you know what, I have to act on it and show progress. Because sometimes we're dealing with a perception issue and not necessarily a behavior issue. And I think to your
Hmm.
point, people who've been in careers for a long time, they know that sometimes they are hitting a perception wall that they have to modify it. And then we have to come back and say, how can we visibly then get into that discomfort and show people around us that that perception they have is changing to the better? Because you're totally right. I think, especially at executive levels, a lot of the time it is a perception issue because they have already achieved so much success. And then for one reason or another, one perception pops up and then it kind of sticks with them. And then it becomes very sticky and you want to
Hmm.
hopefully get them unstuck in that area.
Yeah, excellent. So now people say, okay, look, I get coaching, but I have a couple of goals I want to achieve. I want to get better at speaking. I want to get better at communicating within my executive team. I want to get better at talking to my people who I have in my team. And suddenly you have quite a wide range of goals that people want to achieve. And usually executives have very little time at their hand and they say, I want to achieve them as quickly as possible. So how do you manage expectations with people who certainly have high expectations towards what is going to be the outcome of the coaching process?
Yeah, we come up with in my case, we come up with a minimum of a 6 month engagement where we try to use a sequential progression process. So, for example, in some cases, the person may be suffering from speech fillers. They say a lot of sort of, like, every few
Hmm.
seconds. So I then as a coach have to say, honestly, the first thing we should do is we need to work on the speech fillers. Get past that challenge first. And then we can come back and talk about communication structures that can help them deliver a succinct and organized message. So as we build up each one of these muscles, then we can start saying, you know what? I heard you talking about a lot of things. I can see that there are some amazing stories in your journey that we can build a keynote around. And that can become a keynote that they can deliver internally first. And then we can come back later and talk about how can you become a thought leader who goes out and speaks at conferences, for example, or gets on panels. So we try to bring some of that realism that
Hmm.
realistically we have to go through that gradual progression.
Yeah. What do you do with people who say, look, with the whole speaking thing, I just don't have the extroversion. I know some of my colleagues on the board love to be on stage, and I'm just very good at, for example, let's say finance. I'm just the person who loves to be in the background. I know I have to get on that stage once or twice a year. However, it's nothing I genuinely enjoy. Do you think anyone is able to become a great speaker, or do you think there are limitations for some people?
I'm more of a positive. I think almost everybody can. And what I actually tell them is that once you become a leader, it is no longer about you. And that is the genesis of us understanding that now all of a sudden it's my role to inspire others. It's my role to show others that they can accomplish what I have accomplished. And it's this moment where we tell the leader, you need to become more of a coach. And your
Hmm.
speaking is the platform that you use to inspire others. And
Hmm.
once they sort of get out of that equation where they're thinking about themselves mostly, I say, you know what? We have to change that because now you're someone that actually people look at, and every word you say either is going to make somebody's day or is going to ruin somebody's day because, oh my God, my boss said that, my boss said
Yeah.
that. And you have to help them understand the impact of their words.
Very good. And when we talk about time, let's say someone thinks about getting into having a coach. What is the usual time frame you say is a good start? When people say, hey, should I do it weekly or twice a week for 6 months or 12 months? What do you think is, of course, this heavily depends on the goal you want to achieve and where you start. No question about that. However, what is the
Yes.
usual time frame where you say this is a good starting and end point for a serious coaching approach?
Yeah, most of the time it's a bi-weekly cadence, which allows us to come up with one area to work on, and then we have an opportunity of 2 weeks to work on this particular area. Sometimes we try to also make it based on there is an upcoming meeting. Like in the example of Uber, I was working with one VP, and she used to go and talk in front of the board of directors. It was a quarterly exercise. So a lot of the time, the cadence of my meetings with her were very quarterly, maybe 2, 3 times right before that meeting. So depending on the coachee, we may customize the plan, but on average, it's a bi-weekly cadence.
Hmm.
And you want to make sure that you also decide what are some of the micro results that we would look for because you want people to feel there is progress and momentum along the way.
Excellent. When we now say, let's say someone sits here, listens to this and thinks, I think I should get a coach. However, I don't know how to get heard within my organization because we don't have a culture of coaching. And as soon as I approach my boss, my leader, they probably say, oh, this is reasonably expensive. I think you probably should just read a book about this or look at this YouTube video or just do something else than spending money on coaching. And then usually you hear this phrase like, anyone today is a coach. Just coach yourself. What do
Yeah.
you think? How can people get heard when they say, I want to have a coach, but when I talk to the decision makers in my organization, I don't get heard by them because we don't have a culture for coaching at the moment?
Great point. What I have started seeing recently, like right now, I'm having very good momentum with Cisco, where I had to shift in some cases what I position as an offering. Instead of offering one-on-one coaching purely, I've now started to offer a training program that has on the back end of it some one-on-one coaching. So if they are in a decision-making position, they can opt for something that looks like this format where there is a number of sessions for, let's say, a group of 15, and then we can select 6 people that are going through the program for the one-on-one coaching.
Hmm.
So I would advise listeners to go and ask their leadership team for what's the budget that's available for professional development, and if they would be open to having them use coaching as the approach for getting some of that done, especially when they can articulate the business case for there are certain aspects of my leadership that I'd love to work on with a coach on a one-on-one basis. And I think sometimes that confidentiality is sometimes what's so precious that the business case may be built for it that way.
Excellent. To wrap this all up, when someone is now listening to this and says, okay, I think I really should do this. However, I really don't know where to start. Should I just Google coaches? Should I approach HR? Should I just try to contact someone by myself and then bring this to some of my board members? What do you think is the best starting point to really get into coaching to wrap this interview up?
A lot of the time, like let's say at Uber, for example, I see leaders talking with the HR business partner. Sometimes the HR business partner will have access to 2 or 3 coaches. And I think it's always a good idea to talk to more than one coach before deciding which one you might want to work with. I think good coaches should also be able to give you references of people that have gone through the coaching experience who are willing to speak to the value they received out of the coaching. And of course, they can call me or Niels if they needed a coach to talk to, because of course, I'll be more than happy to talk people through the process or give them some guidance or even share other coaches that I'm working with as well.
Excellent. I think these are the perfect final words. Just to add this, if people now think they want to get in touch with you, how can they reach out?
Ash@executivegreatness.com is my email ID. The website is communicatewithclarity.co is the program that I'm currently offering, which is a training program with a back end of one-on-one coaching. We can also do coaching groups as a result of that, but that should be very easy for them to reach out to me that way.
Perfect. These are the perfect final words. We see executive coaching is more important than ever. So at the end of this interview, there's only one thing left for me to say. Ash, thank you very much for your
Thank you
time.
so much, Niels. Great to be on your show. Thank you so much.